Hey everyone, welcome to the inaugural episode of the Fausone and Grysko podcast. I suppose you could call it a lawcast or something clever like that. But welcome to the podcast. So this is our first episode. Our goal here is to tell authentic, what we in the profession would call legal war stories, to tell those in an authentic way, maybe with a little bit of humor, so that we can start to break down some of the stereotypes surrounding what it's like to engage with attorneys and just get people engaged in the topic, the law, which is going to affect all of our everyday lives and sometimes in ways that we don't understand. So here we're trying to break down some of those barriers into people understanding more about lawyers and more about the legal profession and what you can expect when you come to an attorney for legal services. So the topic today, folks, something to keep it a little bit light, is the 5 things that your lawyer hates to hear. Let's get into it. One thing your lawyer hates to hear is that I already signed it. So this could be a situation involving real estate, perhaps the purchase of a home, a lease to lease for some rental property. Either you could be the tenant or the landlord, or some type of business transaction or a contract, really anything. And so you've already signed it, and now you've brought it to your attorney or somebody that you hope to have an attorney-client relationship with, and you're saying, okay, well, I signed this document, now why don't you just explain it to me? So the problem with this is that oftentimes we as lawyers are trained to identify certain types of problems, and we have experiences ranging across different client issues, right, that we've encountered throughout the course of our careers. So when you come to a lawyer, it's not just the law, right? Somebody can maybe go online on Gemini or on ChatGPT or even on Google, and they can probably look up what the law is, and they can probably get pretty close, even if they don't maybe know exactly what the law is in that regard. And they can probably get pretty close. But how to apply it in a given set of circumstances is something that lawyers develop both through training, through methods of research that are common within the legal profession, and then also the experiences that they've had with clients. And so most of those different things are things that you're not going to get from ChatGPT, you're not going to get it from Google, you're not going to get it from Gemini. And so the lawyer may very well identify things, but now that you've already signed the document, there's a limited amount that we can do about it. And in any situation, you find that a client is willing to take a certain level of price in exchange for a certain amount of risk, right? And so as one goes up, the other may go down, and vice versa. But now, when you've already signed the document, whatever it is, you've taken out the ability of the lawyer to be able to effectively share that experience with you in the negotiation phase of whatever the deal is. And so now at this point, we're really just limited to, okay, you've signed the deal, it is what it is, here's what you could be in for, right? And now you've maybe got a limited opportunity to be able to do anything about that. Another topic, somewhat related, so we'll call this one number 2. Well, I Googled it and it says, or ChatGPT says, etc. And I already mentioned this a little bit in the last one, but again, Google and ChatGPT is not going to be a substitute for an attorney sitting down with the document, understanding something about your business or about your circumstances, and then figuring out how those things are going to apply within the context of the deal that you're talking about. So yes, can Google tell you what the law is? It can help, it can get close. Can AI? All of those things, yes, and those are all good tools, and I encourage people to look at those things. But don't expect that that's going to apply 100% to your circumstances, because it can vary drastically in different circumstances. The other issue with various AI platforms is that they are notorious for hallucinating legal sources. Just as an example, once I threw into an AI platform a question about a particular area of law that I was looking for, it gave me an actual citation to a Michigan compiled law. It quoted the law. It gave me a pinned site of exactly where to go to find that. And then when I independently went and looked up that law, it just didn't exist. The AI just literally made up a citation. And so as more people are using AI to do things like draft web content and blogs and different things like this, when you do your Google search, even if you're not using AI explicitly, Google is going to pull in results from sources that may have been themselves AI generated. And so you just don't know what is going to be legitimate and what's not, unless you know where to look and how to vet the sources properly The other problem with this is that when you do too much looking up of the law on your own without the proper framework and context, you actually don't know not only how that applies to your circumstances, but you have maybe generated now for yourself sort of unreasonable expectations about how simple or about how hard something is going to be. And so I'm not saying don't look up the law, but I am saying manage your expectations before you see the attorney, that even though you may have Googled something and it says one thing, that doesn't mean that that's all there is to the story. So oftentimes your attorney will have to work through that flow of work with you, that law, statute, rule, whatever it is, that contract. They're gonna have to work through that with you and figure out how it applies to your circumstances. Okay, folks, you're gonna love this one. The third thing that I identified that your lawyer is gonna hate to hear is that this should be quick and easy. Within like the estate planning context, it's very common to have clients come in and I just want a simple will, or I just need a quick deed for my property, or hey, here's the price and the terms for a business deal. Can you just draft that up real quick? These are the sorts of things that clients will ask us. And again, folks, oftentimes this is going to be a red flag for us as attorneys, because many things that you would think sort of just as a layperson are going to be quick and easy actually can be fairly complicated. And this shows itself, I think, very frequently within the real estate context. Now, don't get me wrong. I have nothing against brokers and real estate agents and things like this, but they have a particular job to do. They're not attorneys. They're using form purchase agreements, oftentimes form land contracts and different things like this that don't necessarily take into account all of the various particular circumstances of your situation. And so even though you may think, well, I've got this real estate purchase agreement, it's very simple, it's boilerplate, let's just use that. That is oftentimes could be problematic, especially when circumstances just aren't cookie cutter, as many times they're not. Where have I personally seen this come up? Oftentimes in the sale of cooperatives, which can be somewhat amorphous. Number 4, I probably should have told you, or I guess I left out this key detail. So you've got to be so careful with this, everybody. Your lawyer is only as good as the information that you provide on a transaction. So, and I've had this come up before where maybe business clients are a little bit gun shy about saying what their total sales volume is or what their sales numbers were for last year or something like this. And this really shows, in my view, a lack of trust. And so what I want to do in that situation is kind of back up and say, okay, well, how can we build trust in order to overcome this situation? Because as an attorney, I really need to understand the full picture of whether it's a family dynamic or a trust and estate issue or a business relationship or a real estate investment. I really need to understand all the parameters that are surrounding this and all the various concerns that a client has in order to be able to give effective legal advice, in order to be able to manage the scope of work and the transactions to make sure that it's really meeting the client objectives. Now, sometimes as an attorney, I do have to probe a little bit, because sometimes the client themselves, maybe they're just not self-aware enough and they don't necessarily know what their own priorities are or should be. And so as an attorney, that's a little bit of my job, is to talk more, draw from some of my experiences in different transactions and use those experiences to really hammer home for people really what it is that needs to be done to make this into a success, whatever it might be. So please, when you go to your attorneys, folks, you can't leave stuff out. You got to be open and honest about everything. Remember, you got to trust your attorney. That's number 1. But number 2 is that anything you tell your attorney in confidence, that's attorney-client privilege. And so this is something that attorneys take very seriously, and there can be some pretty severe consequences to the attorney for breaking confidence. So in addition to the trust that you should already have when you're going to an attorney in the first place, or when you're first building that relationship and developing that trust, you can also feel pretty confident that you can tell your attorney anything, because attorney-client privilege is a big deal. And that's something that attorneys won't break, or there could be some pretty severe penalties associated with that. Number 5 is going to be my personal favorite, that I don't want to spend too much on this. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I don't want to spend too much money on this. What's it going to cost? These sorts of questions. Again, another, maybe we'll call this one a yellow flag or a yellow light, which causes us to pause a little bit. So attorneys oftentimes don't know how much work is going to go into something until they dive into it. Just as an example, if somebody hands me a contract, maybe it's a 5-page contract or something like this, I can be pretty sure that, maybe that's going to take an hour or two to review the document, maybe another hour or two to make some suggestions. And then you've got sort of a client conference that needs to happen where you are able to explain things and really kind of understand. So, I might be able to give you a reasonable estimate of how much time I think things are going to take. But what you run into very frequently is the situation where you've dealt with your client on something, it goes off to the other side, and now you're getting back more communications from an attorney, concerns from the opposing counsel or their client, and then there's now even more time that has to go into sort of assessing those objections or those suggestions to the document, and then trying to figure out how do we incorporate this into the document so that everybody feels comfortable with whatever the relationship is going to be moving forward. Unfortunately, in the law business, at least in the context of business transactions and things like that, oftentimes it's still based on billable hours. So how much you pay as the client is really going to depend on how much time the attorney is going to put into it. And I can tell you folks, running a small business, a small law firm like what we have, it can be expensive. And so we need to cover our overhead and still be able to provide really good customer service. In order to do that, we need great attorneys, and that takes money. We have to be insured. We've got our own overhead and things like this. And so it can be something where we really have to build that level of trust with the client on the front end so that they understand that we're not going to overbill them. We're not going to intentionally spend too much time on something in order to drive the price up so that it's more profitable for us. Because ultimately, what we have is trusted client relationships that we really value. And we know that by taking advantage of that trust, not only is that going to harm our reputation, but it's going to impact that client relationship maybe forever, and could even cause us to lose a client relationship, which is never something that we want to see happen. So that's something that, at least here at this firm, at Fausone & Grysko, we don't do that. That would be a huge issue for me, and I would be addressing it with my employees if something like that were to happen. But is it wrong to ask sort of an estimate of how things are going to go in terms of what do we anticipate, the level of time commitment involved and things like that? I would say that is reasonable, and it's also reasonable to expect that you're going to receive a qualified response from your attorney, whether it's me or somebody else. They're going to say, or I would say, well, I think it could take this much time, or between this and this, right? So maybe give you a range of possible costs there. But we always like to set the expectation that we really don't truly know until we dive into the file how much it's going to cost. Oftentimes we do offer free consultations where we won't really give legal advice within the context of that consultation, but we may give a sense of, hey, here's kind of what the law generally would be. Here's what your circumstances are. And, I think that a range of possible outcomes could maybe be X or Y. And this is the amount of time and attention that I think it's going to require, the rates involved in getting there, and maybe likely outcomes or a range of possible outcomes. So these are all things that can be done within the framework of an initial consultation. But ultimately, before we really get into doing a lot of client work, we're going to be requesting usually an upfront retainer. In some cases, there are some situations where we've been able to offer flat fees, typically for trust and estate type work, or maybe even some relatively basic contract work. But it gets really challenging. It can be really challenging to estimate that and do it in the sense of, where both the attorney and the client are going to be happy with the result. One example of this where I tried to offer a flat fee arrangement, and actually it really worked out in my favor that the client wanted to do hourly, was I had predefined a scope of work and said, okay, for this scope of work, here's the flat fee amount that I think that we would be able to do it for. And, if you're willing to pay that up front, it'll basically be like a price guarantee. Well, the client wasn't interested in doing that, I suppose because they thought it was maybe too expensive on the front end, without having a better understanding of what that was going to look like in terms of, how much work was going to be involved. Well, what ended up happening is we just went ahead and billed it hourly, and actually it ended up being way more expensive billed hourly than it would have been had the client just taken me up on the flat fee offer on the front end. But I suppose that's just sort of the risk you take, right, when you prefer an hourly rate model over a flat fee model. So in that case, I was actually glad that the client didn't want to spend too much on it. Okay, folks, those are the 5 things that I would say your lawyer will hate to hear. You can quote me on that. That would be number 1, I already signed it. Number 2, here's what Google says. Number 3, that this should be quick and easy. Number 4, well, I guess I left out a few key details. And number 5, I don't want to spend too much on this. The idea here is simply to start to break down some of the barriers that people might have in feeling comfortable, calling an attorney to ask a question, or even to retain legal counsel on a personal, family, community, or business matter. And these are all things that we do very well here at the firm. And so we'd be happy to hear from you, hear your feedback, give us a review, send us some comments, reach out to us. The links to our YouTube channel and to our website are going to be included below. So go ahead and reach out to us. Let us know what you think, folks. And see you next time.